without a doubt, I think it's by far the best league in the world.
How dare you score like that in the Premier League? Mission accomplished in the Premier League. The American.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the American Scouser TV's Premier League show. We come to you, as I like to refer to it, as during the dreaded international break. I don't understand why we need a break 3 weeks into the season, but we'll get to that, Paul, and we'll probably make some overreactions and quick-wit decisions that will probably come back to bite each of us in the ass if anybody takes the time to refer back to the boring-ass international break. So I'll start with you, Paul. How exactly are you surviving this international break?
Oh, I'm surviving because American football is back, and as much as the international audience probably doesn't care, that's a nice break amidst it. But I think we can all admit that, like, having an international break after 3 weeks of the season kicking off feels a little bit like just the tip, right? Like, it does. Like, can we just have the season or just delay it, right? Just do the break before.
It does feel like those schools that start school the Thursday before Labor Day, but it's only a walkthrough. So you come for a half day on Thursday, then you come a full day on Friday where you really do nothing except for think about what you're going to do Labor Day weekend. And then all the kids come back Tuesday and they can't get in their lockers because they forgot what the combination is. But I say this jokingly, like those kids still have to do the 3 to the left, 2 to the right, 2 to the right thing that we used to have to do. Now it's all digital. They walk up, if they even have lockers, right? Like most likely it's probably something that's like a new age death trap, and they just take up space in the
these
like
kids
the overhead
have no idea how to break into an old bank vault like we do.
It's a good point. I started to learn how to use a stethoscope on a thing because you could actually hear the damn thing click, and it's the same way people robbed banks in the 70s. Thank you, Whitebrook Middle School. One more thing you taught this derelict how to do. So speaking of derelicts, those who don't know, we didn't have a show last week because at the time we would have been recording this show, us two fools were sitting with our better halves, and by the way, much better halves, in the bleachers at Wrigley Field. So to give our listeners a view into that, Paul, how would you describe our event at the bleachers at Wrigley Field? Because I know I would describe it as 4 people going on a date and quickly realizing that it was only me and you as the night went on. Because the other two did not. As soon as they realized they liked each other's conversations, they decided they no longer needed to have conversations.
Basically, our ladies left us for each other, which was it's pretty hilarious. I think Gally and I spent 30% of the time trying to figure out the numerous obstacles that you have to do to get a beer in the bleachers in Cubs Stadium, which involves
much more difficult. It is more difficult than other places. I mean, first of all, once I get in a line and someone tells me I don't look old enough to get a beer, I'm usually like, wait, they could have gave me the wristband when I walked in through security, but instead I had to actually walk. And I just walked to a folding table in the middle of the bleachers. It was 2 old men. I looked at them and they were like, you need one of these? And it was a wristband. I was like, yeah. And I pulled out a license. They're like, oh, you don't need to show us that. This is the bleachers at Wrigley Field. I was like, wow. All right. Well, why didn't that lady just let me have it there? But I digress. So maybe the only thing more confounding and difficult to define and or explain than the beer drinking rules in the bleachers at Wrigley Field is what happens week to week in VAR. And as we do every week on this program, we talk a little bit about a week in review. We're not going to go as deep into the matches this time around because it's been a couple weeks since these happened. But there were a couple big talking points from match week 3, arguably maybe the biggest flashpoint so far of a VAR decision, whether it be a VAR decision or a review, maybe even just an on-field decision by a referee. We're going to lump this one in because I do believe the Declan Rice sending off, both for, they did review his first foul for potentially foul fair play. I think it was a good decision to make it just a yellow. It was a strong tackle. that first tackle. It looked worse in real time because he was sliding. I don't think there was malice in it. Let's go to the second event, because the reason VAR gets involved is, believe it or not, they were looking for potential foul play on Veltman. Did not feel that it was because of the swing out and the kick. So, Paul, first off, let's go to the call itself. Where do you stand on how the match official handles that? Do you like how he did it? Would you like to have seen it handled differently? I have a feeling we're going to agree on this, and the masses maybe.
Yeah, I love that it gets called in general, just because I think so many times these guys get away with that, like right there. And I think Rice does the cheeky little, like, moves the ball out of the way, right? Like, just at the last moment, and then Veltman catches him on the follow through. I love it. I mean, because Rice tries to sell it, but he's doing exactly this is done a million times, but I just feel like that doesn't get called enough, right? So, like, I personally loved it. I loved every minute of it. Probably don't love it as much as I'm an Arsenal supporter, but, like, certainly think that it's 100% legitimate.
So, flip it around now. We've seen some bonehead plays, bonehead decisions by Liverpool players over the years, taking cards. Gerrard stomping on, I forget who it was in the United midfield that basically ended his United versus Liverpool career. His last appearance versus them, I think it was about a minute, because he was just really pissed off. He wanted to stamp on Brandon Rodgers for sitting him on the bench for a United match at Anfield. But we've seen it, right? The Mane elbow that could have been against Chelsea. There's been so many of them that you can think of. So do you put this on Rice? Do you put this kind of heat of the moment? Because, they have Spurs coming up next, and he has to know he was booked in the first half. And as a guy who's supposed to be like an emotional leader, if not, and I know he's not the captain, but he's supposed to be one of the leaders. They paid $100 million for him to change the concept of the way they operate. Are you disappointed in Rice there? Or if you're Arteta, you just put your arm around him. You're like, hey, kid, you got caught. And by the way, next time, figure out how to do it without getting caught.
I think it's more the latter, because I don't think – I really just think there's like I think players at that level just carry themselves with the casual arrogance that you need at that level. And I don't think he thinks it's ever getting called. Like, you know what I mean? I think if anything, I think he's getting it against him. And I just think he got caught out. I think he wasn't thinking in a moment. And I think he's, I feel like Declan's probably done that a number of times. And this time it just caught him in the ass because he was on a yellow.
And believe it or not, it was the first time in his professional career he saw red of any format. He has never been given a straight red. Kind of shows the quality human that he comes across as to everyone except for our Irish listeners out there, of course. But I do think there is something about the player. I think there's also something about where he did it, how bad he tried to sell the kick out afterwards. Madley clearly saw it on the pitch immediately and was like, oh, I have no choice. This guy's trying to take a quick free kick. I called it a foul against you. You didn't like it. That was clear. You tapped the ball. Now, at first I thought he got it for simulation, and I was like, that's a little tough. But then when I saw that he tapped the ball,
yeah,
if he'd called it a yellow for the foul or for dissent, I have a real problem. The fact that it's for the blatant kicking the ball and stopping of a direct free kick, I understand earlier in the match they were mad that one didn't get called on João Pedro. But that ball's right on the end line, and he can argue he's trying to keep it in regardless of how he does it. So a couple other quick ones, and we'll get off the VAR subject. The Liverpool United match had a lot of flashpoints in it. One was the De Ligt foul on Diaz, where it was quickly reviewed and cleared, where I do think that was a reckless challenge and was gutsy by the player. It's never a red card for me unless there's some real intent. And I think De Ligt just knew there was a faster guy running by him. I'm going to take him down. Catches him slightly high. But did you have any question that should have been reviewed? And do you think the referees on the field made a mistake in that situation?
No, I think that's the right call. And I didn't think it was a red either. I think the only thing that you can say is that, like, I think when you're a player and you come in that fast and that hard, you put yourself in a spot. But I thought he displayed enough control in the way that like he came in with one leg, no cleat really clearly up. Like I just thought he came in with enough control that the speed in which he did so didn't play in as heavily as it would if he, obviously took him out. Then you're looking at a straight red at that pace.
Yeah, that was kind of how I came as well. I didn't think that there was really an issue there. I do think that he's fairly lucky later in the match that he doesn't see a second yellow for one of the fouls. But I do want to talk quickly here. Minute or two, we'll touch on this one. What were your take on the Mazraoui foul on Gakpo on the edge of the box? And I guess from a two-parter here, because we can rip on Anthony Taylor whenever it's possible, and there might be a reason here. Anthony Taylor plays advantage to a foul on the edge of the box where the ball is going out wide. Now, the fact that there could be a penalty, we'll get to the VAR situation. Like, why on a ball playing out wide would you ever not call a foul on dead set on the edge of a box in a shooting area? Like, to me, I thought that goes against everything that refereeing, because they always said, like, you play the advantage if there's a direct goal-scoring opportunity, except for when a free kick is a direct goal-scoring opportunity, and you have Trent and Mo on the pitch.
Yeah, I mean, I think you nailed it. I think you can say that's the thing. I think that you would only play advantage in that situation if A, you clearly thought it was outside the penalty area, and B, you thought it was clearly going into a goal, like somebody was on the door getting ready to score, right? But like neither of those things like were very clear, and the fact that the ball was going out wide makes it even more ridiculous. So yeah, like you're right. It's a weird one. But like when we talk Anthony Taylor, it's like anything's possible. So like none of us are. We can all say that doesn't make any sense, but we're all not surprised that common sense isn't applied there.
So VAR does look at this play to try to determine whether or not the foul is in the wrong area or not. Now, it's weird to me because John Brooks is talking it through, but like I don't know that VAR is allowed to look at that foul if an advantage is played, because the ref has deemed that there was a foul, but he's calling advantage, unless it's for being in the box. But if they're determining that there was a foul, it was clearly in the box. So why aren't they pulling that back in that spot for a penalty? Or is this another example of the referee?
I mean, they're getting put back in a spot possibly where they have to call Anthony Taylor to the monitor. And I think that's ultimately what they're trying to avoid, right? Like, I just think, I don't know. The whole thing was a mess. And like, I think it just all comes down to like two things really. Like, why are you playing advantage there? And the only thing they can be looking at that point is whether the ball was in the box or not. So
it just feels to me like maybe the match official or the VAR official didn't realize that he had called the advantage on the field, and he was actually looking at it from the standpoint of, one, was it a foul, and two, was it in the box? And then someone got in his ear and was like, he played it, or he saw it on the replay and he sees the guy play advantage and he's like, oh, now I just have to say it wasn't in the box.
Yeah.
And we can just all move on, and Anthony Taylor doesn't look like as much of a buffoon. If we had more time, we would talk about the human magnet that is David Coote, because bad decisions stick to him like glue and balls bounce off him very similar, because he had 2 assists in the Leicester match, like 2 balls hit him and goals went in the net, and neither time did they count the goal. It's something you can't even make up unless it was David Coote involved, and then you probably think there's probably something nefarious that caused it. Let's just quickly here, before we look at the table and kind of give some of our overreactions after 3 weeks. Obviously, Brighton, Arsenal 1-1, massive result as far as the table goes. We're going to spend enough time on our Monday night podcast and all of our morning shows talking about the Liverpool 3-0 thrashing of United. And I don't even think it was that close. So we can't have a segment without talking about the team that sits rooted at the bottom of the table. Everton 2, Bournemouth 3. Are you starting to believe this is the year? This is the year with that shiny new stadium, they go down? Because I say every year I'm not believing it till I see it because I still think they have more talent. But now that I start to look at that side, and I watched that capitulation pretty much with an Everton supporter right till he left and said, I got to go meet my wife. How bad can it get? We're up 2-0 in the 84th minute. I mean, I was too nice to him to say, it can get worse. You can wake up tomorrow and still be an Everton supporter. What would you say if you're Sean Dyche today on the training pitch to those players, or are you just literally saying, hey guys, enjoy the new manager bounce because you're going to get one soon?
I mean, what can you say? Like, I think, we talked about how, like, the year we won the title, there was, like, kind of that special feeling. Like, I'm getting those tingles when I think about Everton going down this year. Like, it feels like when you're inventing the most, like, catastrophically dramatic, thrilling ways to lose a game like that, like, it just starts to feel a little bit special when you're letting 2 goals in injury time with a 2-goal cushion. So, like, I don't know what Sean Dyche can do here, and I don't know what he can really say. And the end of the day is the thing that Sean Dyche has always hung his hat on is that he's going to make it tough to score on you, and he's going to like scratch out some draws. And unfortunately, the problem for Sean Dyche is this team is fairly decent from a talent standpoint defensively, but they don't look like it. And that's a real problem for the way he coaches and manages.
Yeah, Crystal Palace gets off the snide after a couple of disappointing results with a draw against Chelsea, which I don't even know what you take of that anymore. It used to be a draw at Stamford Bridge would be something Crystal Palace would literally start to probably write this early start of their season on. Newcastle, big home win against Spurs. Even though they were outplayed for most of the match, they found a way to score a couple goals in classic Newcastle fashion. For me, the biggest thing for Newcastle, and we're going to look at the table in a minute and kind of give some of our overreactions, underreactions, what we see coming. We all made all the jokes and everybody loved a good joke. And I know we even had some comments in Discord about, how can Italy go right back to starting Tonali after 10 months being out? You see when he comes on the pitch for Newcastle in the second half, what they've been missing, and that they bought a Champions League quality player who is, probably right up there with Bruno Guimaraes, their second most talented. Him and Isak, probably the most talented players. You start thinking about them wrapped with Gordon, eventually getting Joe Linton back, the industry they get from them. I do think Newcastle is going to be a different animal as the season goes on. And I do think we're going to start to see over the next month why they bought Sandro Tonali and how important he is to that side. Because I think he adds a level of Andre Pirlo, and no football side has ever been worse having a guy like Andre Pirlo playing in it, pulling strings. And they're a different side when they have a playmaker like that playing from the back. What are your initial thoughts as we look at the table here on highlight it right outside of Europe, sitting in 5th place on goal difference, Newcastle United?
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think Tonali's a difference maker anywhere he goes. I think the one thing that's not going to get talked about enough right now is the fact that I think they're gelling. This is first kind of run on the trot, but I think if that front 3 can gel, I think that Harvey Barnes has the real ability to have the Mahrez effect. Do you know what I mean? I think that he makes everybody around them better, and when he plays, he scores. And I think he has the ability to really kind of bring that front 3 attack to the next level there. And then you've got Tonali behind him.
It's an enormous upgrade when you're thinking the options were either playing 2 strikers that don't fit in Wilson and Isak, or it's playing Jacob Murphy, who, to be fair to him, has been better than anyone ever thought he'd be in his time at Newcastle. And when Newcastle's big money Saudi owners came in, everyone was like, oh, Jacob Murphy will be gone before you know it. And he's made himself an everyday player, and I give him credit for that. But we're talking Jacob Murphy and Miguel Almiron. They're really good squad players. But if you have Harvey Barnes, Gordon, and Isak, and then you can get Wilson fit, and they did buy that Ursula player, the young striker from Sheffield United. He's a good young player. He's just very, very raw. So it'll be interesting to see where they go. So let's quickly run this through here. If you're looking there at the top of the table, we'll go Man City down to Tottenham. What jumps out at you as the most surprising? What would you expect to change rapidly, quickly, etc.?
I mean, I think the most surprising is Arsenal. Yeah, Arsenal fourth is probably surprising. The most surprising is probably Forest at 9, if I'm perfectly honest. Like that's a pretty steep climb from where a lot of us envision them. And conversely, outside of that, I'd say looking at Crystal Palace at 16 with the talent they have on that side. Granted, they've lost a lot of it, right? But I still think they have a ton of talent in that side. I think we can still – I almost think that Forest and Palace at the end of the year will be flipped there.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I expected more out of Palace to start the season. Maybe it was the transfer unrest. Maybe it was people starting to figure out the new manager and some of his tactics. To me, I think my biggest overreaction is how mediocre this league is. And I say that because there's been so many draws so far already. You have these big 4-0 Tottenham wins and then big Tottenham losses. And I just don't feel like any team outside of maybe Liverpool and, of course, United or in City, have really shown. Yes, should Brighton be really excited about 2 wins and a draw? Of course they should. They did benefit from 2 red cards that both people in both matches, people questioned at times the validity of each. I think those red cards really helped them. And if Brighton really wanted to feel good about themselves, they would have went on and beaten Arsenal in that match because it was there for the winning. And they didn't allow themselves to take that match. So, to me, I think the biggest key, and I know we're going to sound like a homer here, I think on the top half of the table, I am surprised at Liverpool, and I don't think it's just the 9 points, because if you had told me we'd have 9 points from those 3 matches, I might tell you that was doable. If you told me it would be outscoring opponents 7-0 and be in complete control outside of a first half performance against Ipswich Town, which was a newly promoted side, and we weren't up for it, to be fair. They were just as good, if not better than us in those 45 minutes. I would have a hard time at that with a brand new manager, especially after 9 years of being stuck in to a system that was so juxtaposed to what they're getting asked to do. So we'll save the tactics of Liverpool for our Monday night podcast. But do you think we are down to see ourselves a 2-3 team race between Liverpool, City, and Arsenal to the end? Do you think this is sustainable for both City and Liverpool to really kind of separate themselves? Because, Arsenal's got to go play, while we're at it, we'll take a look at next week's matches. Arsenal's got to go play Spurs without Declan Rice suspended on a red card. And from all accounts, without their captain in Martin Odegaard, who went off with what looked like a pretty bad ankle injury today. Playing in a meaningless game for Norway or whoever. Who was he playing? Yeah, it was Norway, right?
Yeah.
So, thoughts on 2-team race, 3-team race?
I was just going to say that today is a huge blow for Arsenal because he is essentially the conductor back there in every regard. We talked about our Player of the Year shouts, and he was in it. So, I think that is a huge, huge deal for them because he is their engine. So that could definitely cause a severe drop in Arsenal's form and performance over the next few weeks. It'll be very interesting to see. I'll tell you what, I am as shocked as you are about the Liverpool thing, just in terms of, you talked about juxtaposition and styles. When you talked about hiring this manager, they talked about the fact that a lot of his philosophies were very similar to Jurgen Klopp. He did a lot of things tactically from a pressing standpoint that were similar. And so I think a lot of people assumed that this would be, heavy metal football 2.0, and that it is not. And I think there's a couple of great things. Some of my favorite things that I've seen that make me very hopeful for this year on top of this is not only control in which they're playing and the ability to see games out, the way that he is rotating substitutes in game early and often is in who they are. He's not afraid to take Mo Salah off and And I think that Mo needs that. I think that he needs somebody who's not afraid to look out for him for the long run. Same thing, subbing off Trent, giving Bradley valuable minutes. Like, it seems like he's not only just rotating often and well, he's being incredibly intelligent about it. And the fact that this team, we talked about it all last year, as good as it is, like, couldn't continue to concede and leak goals like that. So the fact that we are scoring at the clip that we're scoring and this team is not conceding, I think if you're the rest of the league, and I'm not just saying this as a Liverpool supporter, I think if you're the rest of the league and you've seen this has to make you very nervous.
I definitely think it makes teams nervous. I don't know if it is making City think, we're going to get upseated by this team, but I think what it is doing is it's making people know it is only going to get better. And you should be taking your opportunities now, because it is going to get even. If it's difficult now to score against this side, if it's difficult now to get possession and get a foothold into a match, and we're going to make mistakes. We've talked about this. But if it is this difficult now, it's going to get even more difficult as they get more and more. Because we'll talk about this in the Monday Night Show a little bit. I don't even think we've actually seen the iteration of Arne Slot football that he expects them to play yet. I still don't think we've had like a super long extended period of possession that leads to a tap-in goal, like we've seen from City, where they kill you with 80 passes and then they score at the end of it. And you're opening teams up. I still think we're doing quick hits. I just think what we're doing better than ever is we're showing that even in this style of football, when we want to, we can turn it on, be ruthless, and score a goal. But we're also showing that we have the ability to sit back and soak up pressure and defend, and also see out matches and see out situations that maybe we didn't have to, and that we didn't have in the past. Before we preview a little bit to next week, talk about what our viewers should be watching for on the weekend, I got to bring this up because, I always love to find the romanticism in a team or two staying up. But, man, this league, what is happening to the most competitive league in the world? If after 3 match weeks with 27 points on offer, the promoted sides have secured 2 points. I mean, that, to me, I don't know that speaks to any form of balance. To me, it almost speaks to the fact that there's something broken in this process, because it's almost like we're just bringing 3 teams up to send 2 to 3 of them back down every single year.
So what do you think has changed in the last 5 or 10 years? Do you think it's the money? Do you think it's the 5 substitution rule?
I do think it's the 5 I think the 5 substitution rule has absolutely made it much more difficult for the small clubs. Sean Dyche, as much as we love to pick on him on this program and in this station, he was spot on when he talked about how City's allowed to bring on 5 world-class players, and I bring 3 kids who don't belong in a Premier League side. And he literally said that like with a straight face at the podium. And he's like, this rule is killing the game. Yeah. And I do think it's that. I also think it's all the extra football. I mean, I do think that these smaller clubs are being asked to play. They're not playing 60 games a year, but they're playing a lot more matches than they're supposed to play as well. And I also just think that when it comes right down to it, Liverpool's got some players in their academy under 21s that are better than players that are playing at Ipswich. And I just think the absolute depth between these teams, it doesn't allow the smaller sides the same world to compete. And I also think that the institution of VAR probably has yanked points away. I bet if we took VAR decisions out for the last 3 or 4 years, some of those promoted sides would be a goal or 2 away from the points they needed to stay up. But they weren't, because maybe the right call was made to chalk off a goal for a handball and build-up that used to keep Norwich up, or gave Huddersfield a second shot.
Yeah, and I don't like to encourage conspiracy theories or anything, but I am fairly convinced that if you watch this game long enough, you notice that the games that contain title hunters and those title race teams, the level of scrutiny and the amount of VAR that is in those games is different. It's different. And that doesn't bode well generally for the underdog there in that situation.
So I'll ask you again, now that news is broken that it looks like Leicester have, and I'll give the fingers crossed for them, beaten their charge of breaching of the profit and sustainability rules. Looks like they will not get a points deduction at this point. Do you think Leicester is the side that has the best chance of the three to stay up, or are you still kind of giving all three of them an incomplete until you see that Leicester has a striker that isn't, pretty close to getting a colonoscopy in the next 5 years?
Well, I was gonna say there's a lot of party left in that party, so I don't know. We'll have to see what happens there. I don't know, man. I still of these, I guess probably of the promoted sides. I still like Ipswich a lot. I think they have the ability to score. I just don't know if they're good enough defensively.
Yeah, I picked Wolves to go down as like my kind of hot take. And when they're sitting where they are and as poorly as they've played, nothing has shown me anything that makes me think they're any better than I picked them to be. So I'm not going to jump off that. And I think Everton's been so bad, I think you actually have to question whether it can get worse. And maybe they're an injury or two away, or a player being sold in January, to that actually getting worse. So for that, I'm going to say one of them stays up. I'll go with you and say Ipswich. If two were to stay up, I'd say Leicester. I don't see anything out of Southampton so far that makes me think that they look like a Premier League side, nor do they want to be a Premier League side. So it'll be interesting there. Let's quickly look here at next week's fixtures, talk a little bit about a couple of the ones that jump out at us. Obviously, I think the tastiest clash is Tottenham versus Arsenal on Sunday morning. How do you see that match going, especially with the idea that Arsenal may be down both Declan Rice and Martin Odegaard?
You know what? I still think Arsenal have enough here. I have not been super impressed with Tottenham, even though they've had control of a lot of games. They don't seem to be clinical or lethal enough up front right now. I think at this point in the season, I still think Arsenal is going to be okay here. If I look at these fixtures, I think there's the two above them fascinate me. And I'll tell you, I think the Chelsea-Bournemouth thing fascinates me because despite Chelsea, Cole Palmer is single-handedly propping them up, even getting Jackson on the board. So I think that game is going to be very interesting just based on the fact that Chelsea is this weird amalgamation of 100 players and their story. And I think that Bournemouth has been punching above their weight despite some really seriously awful VAR decisions that have gone against them. I just think there's the potential to be a lot of fireworks in that game. I'm very curious to see which way that goes because I think it can go either way. But I think the one that kind of is going to go under the radar that's really special is this Aston Villa-Everton match. And I'll tell you because I think Everton, I think this is a make or break game in week 4 for both of these teams for two very different reasons, right? I think Everton has to have this in some fashion if they're not going to go down. To me, if they come in here and they roll over, I think they're dead. Dyche has got to go, and they've got to hope for some life to be breathed back in that side. If Villa doesn't come away from 3 points here and get Watkins back on track, I think it could be a really, really tough season for them because I don't think they're as deep as they need to be playing in some of the fixtures they're playing.
Yeah, I think the Champions League matches, obviously the League Cup starts next week, midweek, and then we go into Champions League the week after. And it basically runs until April or February if you make the knockout stages. So basically Villa's going to be playing twice a week with pretty much the same squad. And I am with you there. I think they're going to have to really make a sound decision. And we know how Unai Emery is, and he doesn't love to rotate either. That'll be really interesting for me. I agree with you. I think the response from Everton, one thing I will say, I do think I would have probably picked a draw between Tottenham and Arsenal because kind of what I do in these big emotional ties, especially when maybe the better team's playing on the road. I think being down a couple players, if Spurs get Solanke back and he's able to train all week long, he had some really great opportunities in that first match against Leicester City, and you could see why they bought him, and you could also see why people think he could be a really good success because they create so many opportunities, and he is a really good Premier League finisher. Statistically, I think second or third to only Holland and I think it was Holland and Watkins last year were the only people in the league who had a higher finishing rate than Solanke did. So I could see them having some joy. I'm still going to think that's going to be like a 2-2 draw. I'm with you. I think Bournemouth-Chelsea could be really interesting. Another match that I would keep my eye on, though, is that first match on Saturday morning. Because if for some reason Southampton were to get an early goal or put some pressure on United, that thing can go really, really sideways quick. Because let's totally be real. Man United should have 1 point through 3 matches, with that being a draw at home against Fulham where they were toothless. So, the Xerxes goal came out of nowhere. I understand the João Pedro thing comes after a mistake and the goal being chalked off for offsides, but either way, it's a goal scored. So it's going to be really, really interesting. Either way, as always, as we wrap up every show, we always ask you to do all the things, right? Get in there, smash the like button, subscribe to the channel, sign up for the notifications, hit all the big thumbs ups except for the one that goes down. But most importantly, tune in to the morning show, the Monday night podcast, the Thursday night podcast. If you'd like to get involved with the channel and you think you could contribute or join this band of idiots, as we like to say we are, feel free to drop us a message on any of our socials, and we are always looking for new contributors. So for myself and Bickler, thanks for watching the Premier League show. We'll be back next week, hopefully, to ruin all of your weeks with another Liverpool victory. And, of course, talking about all the big news, including what those referees did on the VAR. So stay tuned for more. Have a great week, and we'll talk to you soon.